Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about Mahmoud Khalil and the questions about whether or not he is rightfully detained, whether he will be deported, so on and so forth. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight. After a serious topic like this, we want to leave a smiling face. It's going to be something that can leave you happy going into the rest of the day. And of course, we will end today with that. But for now, we're going to jump into our daily delight. Our daily debate. So, is Mahmoud Khalil's persecution, is by some word that some people would say, arrest, is the actions that this Trump administration is taking against him, we can use any form you want, is it a righteous one? Is this campaign to get him out of the country righteous? You're going to hear plenty of arguments from Marco Rubio here and from the author who semi-agrees with what he's saying, and you'll hear some pushback from me as well. So, with that said, throw your comments down there, and now let's actually jump into our article that comes from the Washington Examiner. I'm going to once again set the stage. We're going to read the first paragraph, a little bit of the second one, and then from there, we will discuss. Quote, the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University student and anti-Israel activist, tests President Donald Trump's new policy to deport foreign nationals backing terrorist groups. The first case of its kind, it has ignited media frenzy and protest. Now how it unfolds could significantly influence the political climate during the initial phase of Trump's second term. Khalil, a green card holder, was highly visible in his role as lead negotiator during the Gaza Solidarity encampment protests on behalf of the activist group Columbia University Apartheid Divestment. End quote. So, let's ask a very basic question. Do you, as a non-citizen of the United States, have the same rights as a citizen? This came up in our deportation argument the other day, or conversation the other day. And I say conversation because, it's not actually one-sided, but I feel as though there's a back and forth here. I mean, you can answer on your own side of things, so I imagine that people are actually talking on the other end of this, and it's an important question. Now, it gets a little bit more furry, a little bit more hairy with the green card thing, but let's disregard that for half a second. As a person that resides in the United States, not a citizen of the United States, does he have the same rights as a U.S. citizen? Should he have a right to due process? A lot of people would say yes, he's a human being. He has the same human rights as anybody else. And while he may have human rights, we do not have the right to take away his life. I think that every person is able to defend their life to a certain degree. And if you violate the tenets of a society, when you're living in said society, then I think you can make that argument. But in the most general approach, just for illegally crossing the border, can you take that person's life away because they are a legal resident in the United States? No, you cannot. You can deport them because they did not come through the proper channels. Now, let's move on to the green card question, because that's my stance. I want to hear yours. Throw it down there in the comment section. The green card question is one that makes this much more hairy, because when someone gets a green card, they are entitled to similar rights to a U.S. citizen. Not exactly the same rights. There are restrictions here or there. These visas and green cards can be revoked, but they still have to go through some sort of trial. They are offered some level of the same level of jurisprudence and the ability to defend themselves in court that a United States person who is a full citizen enjoys. Now, does that mean that they can not be removed? Of course not. There are plenty of reasons that green cards are revoked, visas lapse. We're not trying to pretend as though there's anybody saying, oh, well, I take that back. There are people genuinely saying it doesn't matter if he has a green card, he shouldn't be taken away anyway. But the point that I think is more important here is, does that green card protection actually enable him to use freedom of speech as a tool that is for something that the current government doesn't necessarily like, and also is, you could argue, antithetical to the interests of the United States? Is Israel being attacked and being an unstable country in the region a non-favorable outcome to the United States? Of course it is. And is Hamas a designated terror group? Of course it is, especially after the atrocities of October 7th. You know full well, you and I both know full well, that they are a terrorist organization. And even if you don't agree with that classification, they are classified as such. And what I mean by that is if you don't agree, you say they're fighting oppression, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter what we say on that front because they are classified as such in the legal codes. Well, technically, they have obtained a classification from the administration, the previous administration, the Biden administration. Actually, I don't think technically they ever got a, they got one, they got the same thing as underneath the Donald Trump administration. So it's actually long-standing from the first Donald Trump administration to the second one. But the point being that supporting a terrorist group, even if you don't agree with that classification for them, at least legally they are classified as such, you have to ask whether or not it is okay for people to go out there and support a terrorist group. Now, I think that the parsing of the language here is very, very specific. He is within his first, and this is Mahmoud Khalil, he is within his First Amendment right, which technically is still processing. He does have the right to due process, but does that mean he has all of the constitutional protections? Not necessarily. He still has the ability to protest. He has been legally let into this country. We have essentially made an agreement with him. We have had a contract with him saying you can benefit from the fruits of our labor if you're willing to go through this process and stay a United States citizen, benefit our economy, so on and so forth. And I think it is a violation of his free speech rights in order to say you went out and you protested against a certain issue and you protested with the intent to prop up or at least talk about the actual, I was going to say benefit, but even then I think that's a little bit generous, the people fighting back against it, and they happen to be a terrorist organization. Is he materially benefiting a terrorist organization? Is he going out there and is he supplying parts to different weaponry that could be used in the United States? No, he is using his ability to speak in order to spread an idea. He is out there trying to advocate for what he believes in. And while a green card holder and a U.S. citizen are very different, the categorization of this, oh, well, he is a person who is in here on a green card and he doesn't have the same rights. What do our contracts mean if we're going to let them degrade like this? I understand that if you are not a citizen of the United States and you broke the laws in order to come into this country, you are violating the sovereignty of it. You should be deported and you should come back through the proper channels. This man came through the proper channels. He is trying to integrate, at least for the most part, into American society, though you may not agree with everything that he's saying. And I'm not saying I agree with anything that he's saying. Even if you don't agree with everything he's saying, he is trying to integrate into the U.S. system and therefore should be given the benefit of the doubt and the presumed protections of the Constitution, because we have essentially signed a contract with him saying that you are allowed to be here and you are allowed to benefit from our system. Now, if you're going to make the argument that he's actually preaching things that are antithetical to the interests of the United States, that's fair enough. But also, then you have to ask the question, is that a standard that we are going to uphold going into the future? If we have a United States citizen who comes out and protests in favor of Hamas, the main difference between those two is one is a green card holder who we've given permission to stay here, and one is not. Now, if you're going to, and I understand there's a very fine line there, but obviously the United States citizen is fine to speak their mind. Why should not be this person that we are allowing to come into the country and benefit from our systems and we've made an agreement with do it? And I think, honestly, if that's really parsing in order to find a really fine detail, but I would actually be more okay with it if they did this uniformly. So if you have a person on a green card coming here and talking about other terrorist organizations who they don't necessarily agree with, if it wasn't just in support of Israel, because this is a free speech issue. I understand the Israel issue is very contentious here in the United States. Israel has the right to defend itself. We've said this many times on this podcast. That's not the point I'm actually getting at here. This is a free speech issue. And in the minds of people, if we're willing to erode it for these sort of cases, at one point when we say, okay, this certain type of speech is allowed. You can go out and protest the DI programs, but you can't go out and protest anything that is Israel related. We're starting to create these carve outs. We're allowing, again, the idea of hate speech to infect our willingness to have conversations. And I mean that in the most literal sense. Hate speech is a way to silence opinions that you do not like. And whether or not you agree, hate speech is a creation of the late 1980s and this rhetoric that comes out of Europe in order to silence political parties, because they are genuinely advocating for violence. And it is a mechanism by which you can shut down some of these organizations in their beginnings because they are speaking hatefully. Though I understand the rationale, I think that the eroding of it in this way leads to things like in Europe where you're not even allowed to misgender somebody. And when I say not allowed, you can go to jail for it. And whether or not you think that is morally okay to misgender somebody, or you think it's morally okay to go to jail, that's not the point. The fact that you are not even allowed to say that this person is this, you're not allowed to say things that are maybe hurtful to some people, but true, that is a dangerous eroding of free speech. If you can limit what people say, you can limit what people think. If a word is not in the dictionary, North Korea is a great option. Look at different people who have come out of North Korea. They speak about the words not necessarily having direct translations to North Korean because they are not in the dictionary. I understand I am using a slippery slope argument here, saying the slow erosion will continue, but look to Europe. Europe has been on this path for basically a generation at this point, and they are having people thrown away for what they say online, for simply speaking their minds or going against the orthodoxy. You have examples like North Korea, and let's be clear, North Korea is very different culturally than the United States, but you have examples of where it is the worst case in the North Korea. But if you really want the example of how the slippery slope can be implemented on these sort of cases, look to Europe. Europe is the system of Western values where we had developed part of our system. And to look at them and see that that could possibly be our future, that is terrifying. So yes, Mahmoud Khalil should not be out there protesting in favor of Hamas. But does that mean that we can strip him of his rights and not even give him due process? No, this needs to be brought in front of a judge. They need to codify and strengthen the First Amendment rights. Even if the judge specifically says that it is for U.S. citizens only, at least it's codified in that sense, rather than take him away and we don't necessarily know where he is. So there's more comments, there's more quotes in here from Marco Rubio, who makes a very strong point about if he was to speak about these beliefs when applying for the visa, we wouldn't even let him in. That's a fair enough point. We did let him in, and that is on us. But we still have to give him the due process rights that are promised when you get a green card, being a part of the U.S. system, so on and so forth. I also want to leave it there, because if you want to read more, you can go to the link in the description. All the articles, this article specifically, and the next one, the Daily Delight, will be linked there in the description below the like and subscribe button. So let's get to that Daily Delight since I've been talking about it. This one comes from Cheeseburger, and it's CHEEZ Burger. They're a cheesy website, no doubt. And this article talks all about what a Catterday is like. So it's a Saturday, but it's a cat day. And there's hilarious examples of what cats do milling around. There's also videos and photos underneath it of all the different funny things that cats get up to. So if you want to go read this article, like I said, go to the description below, like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post the link to all of these episodes, all of the domestic episodes, as well as the international news episodes 6 and 6 that come out on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.